Let's Take This Outside with Marianne Iveson, the podcast where she speaks to athletes, outdoor professionals, and scientists about why they connect with nature.
Judy Kasiama is an athlete, community activist, disruptor, and content creator, and founder of Color the Trails. Through her work, Judy highlights her experience as a Black woman that skis, rides mountain bikes, hikes, camps, climbs, and explores. Color the Trails focuses on improving access to outdoor activities for BIPoC adventurers. Very excited today to talk to Judy Kasiama. Judy, welcome to Let's Take This Outside. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
We were introduced through the Trans-Canada Trail. I wanted to talk to you since I started this podcast. And you said on the board for the Trans-Canada Trail, right?
That is correct. Yes, I'm one of the board members, board of directors for the Trans-Canada Trails. I've been there since 2021. So it's been an honor to be on the board and just work alongside with them to just really continue to share and support the organization in whatever way capacity that we're working to just ensure more Canadians have access to the trails.
You're a perfect person to be on the board for this. I do have to ask, I want to start things off with, where did your love of the outdoors begin? Because you didn't grow up in Canada, right?
No, I've grown up everywhere. That's what I like to say. I belong to everywhere but nowhere at the same time. I was born in Democratic Republic of Congo, and then slowly my family moved to South Africa, Australia, lived in the United States before moving up here to Canada. And nature has always been part of my life, especially growing up in the Congo. Lived in my family's hometown, spent a lot of time as a kid just exploring nature. So nature was always present. And I think that as we immigrated, it became less accessible because we migrated more towards like city setting versus like nature kind of setting. But even living in Australia, there's a lot of nature in Australia. There's the ocean. And one thing I really appreciate about Australia is like in school, in elementary school, they always bring all these like snakes and stuff like that to teach us about, the environment that we lived in. Because as you know, Australia is something else when it comes to wildlife.
Yep. When did you come to Canada and what was your first impression as a nature lover?
So my family came to Canada as refugees in 2010. And actually when we came, we crossed through land and then we moved to Hamilton, Ontario.
Not a mecca for outdoors.
No, not a mecca for the outdoors. It was very city setting. So that was just like, that was what I kind of was introduced to. It was just like that city settings. But there are small trails in Hamilton. But I think for me, my first impression of Canada was actually even before we moved. I think it was the 2010 Olympics as we were watching it from the States, kind of getting in preparation. My mom always kind of like prepares us before we move to a new country to just kind of be like, look, this is exciting. All of us are like, we don't want to move, but sure. And then it was like, just kind of like, I think for me, seeing Vancouver for the first time, I was like, oh, wow, there's so many nature things. But I don't think for me at that time really knew what that meant. I just knew that I wanted to move to Vancouver because there's nature and I didn't know how to have that access to it. So 2010 is we arrived in Canada and then I moved to BC in 2012. Just 2 years later, just after kind of dealing with a few of the immigration stuff before leaving Ontario.
Yeah, I'm sure that was quite the process, but you are a Canadian citizen now, right?
Yes, since 2019. So, yeah.
So you live in Squamish though, right?
No, I'm currently residing in Burnaby.
Oh, you're in Burnaby. Okay.
Yeah. So not far away from Vancouver, just in Burnaby.
So you still live in this like outdoor sport haven. How has this influenced you? Like, tell us about the sports and the parts of nature that you have fallen in love with.
Living in BC, I think it's such a privilege and honor to live so close to access to nature. Within, I would say, 10-minute drive, I'm in nature. And I know not everybody has that accessibility. So being here, I have to say, nature has been nothing more than healing for me. It has been nothing more than just like a space where I can go and just be me and feel like I feel free and just like to decompress. And I think like, a lot of people may wonder like, why did I move to Canada? My family are refugees in the DRC. So growing up, witnessing a lot of the war in the 90s that kind of forced us to kind of leave, I didn't realize that there was a lot of childhood trauma just because of that war that I had. And a lot of that, I feel like nature helped me process a lot of that, because I think when you're in survival mode, you don't think about how a lot of your environment is impacting you. And not until you're in somewhere calm and safe that a lot of these feelings start coming out. And I think that's what nature did for me. It just created a safe space for me to just be me, but also allow me to share that joy and that calmness that I get from being in the outdoors, to be able to create and Color the Trails, the organization that I founded, as a way of inviting more Canadians, and especially those of us who are Black, Indigenous, and racialized folks who have had perhaps limited accessibility to the outdoors, to try to provide them that safe space to also engage with the outdoors in whatever capacity. I myself am a skier, mountain biker, and I love hiking. So like those are my kind of three areas in which I thrive, and be able to share that passion with other folks has been just nothing but wonderful. And for us to just also just be on these territories as well, and just continue to not just enjoy it, but also work actively towards reconciliation as well with Indigenous communities.
You're coming at it from so many angles that I think is so necessary. So thank you so much for your work that you're doing. How did you start Color the Trails? And describe exactly what it is, because it's made a huge impact in Canada.
I started Color the Trails in 2017. I graduated from university in 2016 with a degree in international development, history, and gender studies. And before then, I was looking at trying to figure out how to become an ambassador or work with the UN. I was doing some research with some professors around and doing a lot of work like with, Save the Children and all these different NGOs that's working predominantly in the Great Lake region in Africa. But for some reason, I just didn't want to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. It's a lot, especially the topics I was working on. So I took a break from that, and I was doing a lot of hiking. I was managing a coffee shop as well, just doing a lot of hiking. And then I just found that I really enjoyed it. And then I did a lot of research as well, trying to figure out, why there isn't a lot of representation in the outdoors. And I think it was conversation that was being had in the United States, but it just wasn't yet being had in Canada. And that's one thing I noticed between living in the US and living in Canada is before then, we weren't really having conversation on race, racism, diversity, equity, and justice in Canada. That wasn't like a conversation, because I think there's always this assumption or this Canadian narrative that we're very welcoming and like we're very inclusive, we're multicultural. But when you kind of start digging a little deeper, it's kind of very surfacey. So yeah, and then I found Color the Trails, honestly, just as an opportunity to meet new friends of color in Vancouver, because it can be very isolating here to go to a bit of community. But most importantly, also to just be like, hey, I enjoy being in the outdoors. Clearly, there are people that look like me that also enjoys the outdoors. And that's where it kind of came, where I began to do my research and then ended up calling a few Canadian brands into conversation about diversity and equity. And then I ended up working with MEC for like a year, 2 years. And at that time, I think in 2018, they issued the CEO kind of apology for the lack of representation of all Canadians in their media and marketing. And it was just basically me just being like, hey, I'm soon to be a Canadian. I'm in this space. Like, why isn't your marketing showcasing the diversity of Canadian? Why are you keeping us out of this narrative of only a certain demographic are involved in the outdoors? When I go on trails, I see a lot of diversity on trails, but it's not represented in the marketing aspect of things.
For you to make that kind of difference in a company like MEC is huge, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, for many, the outdoors is a space for recreation and for healing, including myself. It's, it's my safe place. What do you think it means for BIPoC and marginalized communities to have these accessible outdoor experiences and feel welcome?
It goes just beyond feeling welcome. I think all of us understand the benefit of being in the outdoors. Research proves like just going for a walk for 30 minutes reduces your anxiety or, blood sugar and all these different things. So for me, I think it's just like the overall mental and physical health for everybody, which is like really essential. However, I think for the BIPoC community, historically, we've just been kind of left out of those spaces. Or if you want to go deeper into it, I think historically, having more BIPoC living in city setting allows more surveillance on those BIPoC individuals versus them being so far away into nature where you can't surveillance what they're doing. And we've seen that a lot with removal of Indigenous children from their families and bringing them into, what are quote unquote modern Canadian families and all that, right? So we've seen that impact of surveillancing the BIPoC bodies. So for me, I think having a safe space in the outdoors and making people feel welcome and being like, hey, this space is also created for you, but also allows a lot of us to not just enjoy the outdoors, but also to become a huge advocate for it. I'm from the Congo, and we've lost a lot of land on my family's tribe because of all the mining that's going on, all of the resource extraction that's going on. And in the same way, I can relate to Indigenous experience in many ways in terms of people being displaced in their home territories due to logging, due to XYZ. So I think there's a lot of shared kind of similarities and stories, just in very different ways. And sadly, my situation caused me to be a refugee. And we're seeing what's going on in the Congo right now with all the mining companies. So I think for us, it's also reclaiming our time and opportunities to be in the outdoors and doing that safely to remove a lot of microaggression, because there's still a lot of microaggression. And I think there's a lot of people who are in denial because we're acknowledging something that we all recognize is there, but then it falls under the gaze of wokeness or XYZ. When in reality, it's those are experiences. So why are you trying to erase those experiences under the presumption of that's woke? When I've been on a ski lift and people tell me, hey, I didn't know Black people could ski, as if it's exclusive to only a certain demographic of people to be able to ski, but rather it's a learned sport. So if you give every child an opportunity to learn to ski, they'll be good at skiing. And if it wasn't a huge financial barrier, it wouldn't be so much difficult for other people to get into it. But I think this notion of elitism when it comes to accessing the outdoors is what I think I challenge and what Color the Trails challenges. And sometimes it does make a lot of people feel uncomfortable.
Someone being like, I didn't know that you ski, that is so ignorant. I can't even believe that someone has said that to you out loud. That's so embarrassing.
Yeah, it's really embarrassing. I recently just kind of shared something that I saw on social media where somebody's making kind of fun of this whole diversity in skiing industry, and the comment sections were wild, where people
so great. Don't look at the comments. Do not look at the comments.
Comments are horrible. People actually believe that if we have more diversity in the sport like skiing, Black people are going to steal their skis and all these different things. And I think that's so funny because I ski Whistler, and sometimes I'm in the Whistler local groups, and I've seen people's stuff get stolen, and it's not Black people that are stealing it. So I just think it's just very ignorant that people make these kind of comments, or it's not, diverse people who are stealing these things. So it's people just like to assume under that assumption. So for me, I think there's just a lot of ignorance around it.
Let's Take This Outside now has a newsletter. Keep up to date with outdoor news, events, and great discount codes and deals from our partners. Sign up today at letstakethisoutside.ca.
You mentioned the financial barrier too. What are some of these barriers that you've identified when it comes to outdoor rec? And clearly you're working to, dismantle these barriers. But if you could point them out specifically other than, financial, that'd be helpful.
A lot of times, a lot of people always assume financial is always the barrier. In many circumstances, yes, financial is a barrier. But I think because the entry is oftentimes very high, skiing is a very hard sport to get into because of the the finances. And this is not just for BIPoC folks. This is, I think, for every Canadian now. Skiing is very expensive. You need to get to the resort. You need to pay a hotel room. You need to pay for lesson. If you're new, you have to do all these different things. And that comes with a huge thing. But one thing I've realized and working with some of the resorts is if we bring a reduction rate, introduce people into the sport, people are then willing, if they really love it, they're willing to invest in that sport. So then that becomes like their thing that they want to do. Then they figure out their own financial means to be able to engage in that sport, right? The important thing is like we've introduced folks to it. In the same way, we run mountain biking mentorship program where we make the access very accessible by pairing people with like experienced mountain riders, creating a mentorship program where they can go ride, working with a local bike shop called Essential Cycles, who provides us bike discounts, lesson discounts, so then we do all these clinic and then we give people the tool. And then people then after the program can decide if they want to continue or not continue. And a lot of time people continue, end up buying their own bicycle, they already have the gear that we provide them. So it's always like, financial is one aspect. But one thing the community has told me is having a community to do things with. And I think that's the most important things, especially when you're learning a new thing as an adult. I think oftentimes there's a sense of fear, embarrassment, shame, all these things when you're learning a new sport. So Color the Trails creates that safe space for people to, at whatever age you are, to come and learn to ski, to come and learn to mountain bike, to come and learn kayak. No matter how much you move your bodies or not, come and hike. We'll go slowly. Our rule is we'll try to go at the pace of the slowest person in our group. And just encourage and have conversation on trails and just create that atmosphere where everybody feel welcome, but also feel a sense of community support to continue going on. And that's a lot of the testimony and the feedback we get back from folks, because a lot of people don't see themselves as sporty, but Color the Trails have made them sporty, whatever that means, right? Because I think a lot of times society has told us who can be athletic and who cannot be athletic. And Color the Trails breaks those barriers and those narratives and brings everybody into the space and just gives people the opportunity to try and figure it out on their own.
I've heard multiple times on this podcast from different guests who are women specifically who say, hey, even being a woman trying to get into these sports can be hard, and there's maybe a bro culture. So I couldn't imagine being both a woman and BIPoC as well, or LGBTQ, or there's these added layers of it too that I can't even imagine.
Yeah, most of the sports we do, and especially being in Vancouver area, the Sea to Sky, there's a lot of bro culture. Mountain biking is a very bro culture. Skiing is very bro. So I think for me, having that safe space, like I say, having a community you can ski with has brought a lot of people who used to ski but didn't like that culture, left the sport, and now coming and refinding joy in it because of Color the Trails and the way we organize our programming. So there is all these different things, added element, but I think doing it as a community has created a lot of opportunity, as well as have kind of shielded us a lot from that culture. And sadly enough, there's a great quote that people create culture. So hopefully the more diverse people we have in these spaces, the more that culture begin to shift. But I think there's also a lot of resistance for that culture not to shift, right? So, but I think having more diverse folks in these spaces allows them to also come with their culture in terms of how they want to be treated in those spaces. And hopefully that will start shifting a little. But I think that's a ongoing thing.
Do you have a specific powerful moment or feedback that you've received from participants of Color the Trails events? Has there been a couple moments from people where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm actually making a difference?
The existence of Color the Trails itself, from not just participants, but even a lot of our leaders who lead a lot of these programs, I think has made a difference. It's hard to describe it because it's cultivating communities, allowing our leaders to connect with a lot of people that also like them, enjoys the outdoors. But for us, I think, there's been a participants who came out and did dragon boat racing, because we do intro to dragon boat. And that participant ended up enjoying it so much, joining a club, and now races dragon boat, and her team has won a lot of medals for dragon boat racing. So for me, that's really powerful to just see, like, they randomly came and tried this sport, and now they're so invested in that community, which I think it's like the whole beauty of Color the Trails. And there's just like stories like that. I think for a lot of people, it's just more of being given the opportunity and having a safe space to do it. So it's one of those things where I can't really share that testimony. I think those testimonies, if you go on our YouTube channel, we've shared some videos there. You're able to see folks sharing their own story, because I think it's a lot better coming from them versus from me. For me, I think I'm just here to support people to find whatever sport that they enjoy.
Judy, as someone who's working to make outdoor spaces more inclusive, what advice would you give other individuals or organizations looking to make positive changes in their own communities?
We all have the ability to bring communities together. And one advice I would give is, I didn't start Color the Trails out of like my ego to make a difference or anything. I started Color the Trails clearly because I saw a need in the community. So I think it's really important to, if you're going to be in this space, and recognize that this is something you're doing for the community more so than yourself. I think sometimes our egos can go unchecked. And also like recognizing that it's not easy space to be in, because I experienced a lot of pushback. I experienced a lot of racism. I experienced a lot of people attempting to shut Color the Trails down because I don't fit into their narratives. Yeah, a lot of people don't want Color the Trails to exist. They don't want me to exist. So a lot of people do fabricate a lot of narratives about me. And I think you have to be a very strong person to be in this space and recognize that not everybody's going to like what you do. But if you're doing it with good intention, you're doing it with really like to support and elevate your community, I believe that, the right people will be there to support you. And I really encourage you, that's like looking around your community and seeing like what is lacking. Or if there's other organization that already exists, reaching out to them and being like, how do I support you in this? Like, I have this talent, I have this skill. How do I bring that forth to your organization to continue to make a difference, to elevate and to support our community? Because I think it's going to require collective collaboration over competition, as well as collective liberation. It's for all of us. It's like, how do we collaborate together to ensure that, whatever it is, whatever space that I'm at, how do I bring others in? But also, like, if you share a passion, and even if you're not a BIPoC person, just somebody who shares a passion, try inviting somebody that you don't see in that passion, in that field, and share with them the joy that you have in that sport. I think that's the best way we can make a difference. It's just like continuously sharing our joy and whatever makes us light up with others, and to bring those people into that field, because it's a great opportunity to engage in conversation and learn about other people, because through CTT, we're just seeing these conversations happening, communities building, friendship building up. And I think that's really beautiful in a time where I think sometimes we all feel very isolated, or it feels like the world is kind of falling apart. And I think this is an opportunity for us to kind of really begin coming together as a community.
I really cannot wrap my brain around someone wanting to shut down something that is bringing people into the outdoor space. Like, it just actually doesn't make any sense whatsoever that
doesn't
you're doing
make
this.
sense to me either, to be quite honest.
I'm so sorry that you have to go through that.
This is what I'm experiencing currently. There's just like a lot of people just don't think that I should be doing what I'm doing, because either it's not them
So
doing
stupid.
it, or that I have too much power somehow to do this. But when I've worked really hard to create opportunity, like, and Color the Trails is not that big organization. We don't make that much profit. We just make enough to sustain all of our events and create opportunity for the community.
So you're a new mom. You said your daughter's about 7 months old at this point, right?
Yes, she is.
How has this shifted your perspective on playing outside in your activities?
To be honest, it hasn't shifted my perspective at all. If anything, it's just made it more enjoyable to be able to bring her into things that I love doing. At 1 month old, we took her camping. She loved it. She's gone camping at 2 months old as well. We go to a lot of nature hikes. She's the kind of baby that does not like staying inside. Like, we have to take her outside, even for her to nap. either walking by the seawall around Vancouver or just going in the forest. Like she just like loves it, and I can see how calm she is. And then I'm continuing skiing. I'm skiing. So I just bring her up in the gondola. My partner and I take turns. He goes and skis and I go and ski, just, schedule around her nap time in terms of when I go. So for me, it hasn't really changed much. It just made me more excited to share the love of the outdoors with her and for her to grow up seeing that this is normal, that she can do this and that, it's not exclusive thing that only certain people do, but like she can do these things. And I think it starts at a young age and hopefully through that teaching, help her to understand, the importance of the caretakers of these lands. We have a lot of books also about nature, but also like indigenous books talking about the land that we're on, which I think is beautiful, as well as like teaching her the importance of conservations and stuff like that. So I think it all starts really young. And I know for a lot of people, they may think that it's a lot of work to have a little one to go in nature, but I think in many ways, if we just bring kids into these spaces that we're already in, that's a really beautiful foundation for them as they grow up in these spaces.
What's one outdoor activity that maybe you haven't tried yet that you would like to try?
Ooh, that's a good one. I want to try windsurfing.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah, I have not tried that one yet. I would love to try that one as well to just kind of see. Yeah, I think there's a lot of components to it, but I'm just like more curious, like that feeling.
You do have events all over Canada, yes. I saw, correct? So if people listen to this and say, hey, I would love to go to one of your events, where can they find out some more information?
So you can find out more about our events on our website, colorthetrails.com. And what's really cool also is this year, March 13th through the 16th, we're hosting our Color the Slope Summit in Whistler, BC. That's also on our website. I think when you log in, you see there. And it's a weekend where we just kind of celebrate joy on the slopes, where we bring a lot of BIPoC folks to ski, snowmobile, snowboard, cross-country ski. You choose your package, what activity you want to do. If you want to do a spa, there's a spa package in Whistler. So that's where our event is. And we're located currently in Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Toronto area, as well as Montreal. So that's where we're based in. So if you just go on our website, you can see all the different chapters and you can go to any of those chapters, but I also encourage people to come out to Color the Slope Summit.
Judy, thank you so much for taking time. I know you probably need to get back to your child. Thank you for everything that you do to make the outdoors more inclusive.
Thank you so much, Mary, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. For more Let's Take This Outside, go to letstakethisoutside.ca.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.